Greetings and salutations, Focus Up family. Welcome to the May 4, 2024 installment of Right of Center Mutant Politics, formerly Sunday School with Charles X, actually Brother Student X today. This show is all politics, global and domestic. We thank you for tuning in with us live on YouTube and various other platforms, or catching up with us on replay. And we ask that you click that like, that subscribe, that bell, and share to support and maintain your Focus Up fix. I am Mr. Nice Guy, nice as in the word Saint spelled backwards, and we got Brother Victor Vigilante Freeman, but the star of this show is Brother Student X. The opinions may be controversial, and you will hear things that sound like praise for polarizing figures, but we're not endorsing anybody. You know, our politics are not party based. We lean on policy here, and we stand on blackness. So without further ado, I pass it off to you, Brother Student X.
Yes, sir, brothers. I pray that all the brothers is doing well this morning.
Yes, we are.
All right.
Yeah.
Doing okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother Vigilante, for being back on the show, brother. You know, your commentary, your contributions are welcome. And so I give much praise and thanks for you being here today. And of course, Mr. Nice Guy, being our host and one who has been very supportive of this show, and myself personally, I'd like to thank the brother too.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you both again. I definitely appreciate being invited back to the show here, Brother Student X. I love the platform here and how you really speak your mind with passion and vigor, as well, Mr. Nice Guy. and your ability to really moderate what we're talking about and bring balance here. I am. To your point, Mr. Nice Guy, I am a person that really doesn't think of things in terms of Republican or Democrat or conservative and liberals. I just think, in terms of what is right and what is wrong. And hopefully, when people hear my message, it'll come from that perspective. That's just my frame of thinking in general. That's why I have the free thinking there.
That's right. And on that note, that's our mutant politics. Hey, brother, Student X, why don't you explain the name and what it's about, and where you came from, and where we're going with it?
Yes, sir. Well, much like what Brother Vic says, is that I don't identify with a political party, if you will, or even a perspective, but I do find myself lining up on various issues, of the board, and just for the sake of giving people a reference point. I use the term right of center, so there are definitely more conservative values, if you will, that, I tend to gravitate towards, hence the right of center. And then we decide to add the word mutant, into the game because, I'm a big time, as well as you are, brother. We're a big time comic book fans, in particular, those that have been published by Marvel Comics. And in the Marvel Comics, a mutant is a human being that possesses a genetic trait called the X gene. And so those that know anything about my background, I received my X, from the Nation of Islam, years ago. And but in the comic books, it causes the mutant to develop superhuman powers. So I'm not gonna, go and say I have superhuman powers. But I do have a perspective that I do believe is unique. And in particular among our own culture, and so getting a chance to share, that perspective, and maybe causing, the greater masses of, not only our people, but the people to see things through a different lens, because I've also spent a lot of time on the other side of the aisle where I've been among many people who do not look like me, and call many of them, friends, and have enjoyed, and benefited from those relationships, so coming from, different sides of the aisle, I believe that perspective is just something, that, it was something I wanted to share, and see if others, found value in my perspective.
Yep.
So our sort of like centered topic that we want to talk about are the college protests that are going on all over the nation. So why don't you set the table about that for us, Brother Student X?
Yes, sir. Well, as many of the people know, there have been protests that have resulted in many arrests. More recently, throughout the nation, and it's all centered around the actions of Israel. And many of these protesters, I feel that these actions are, anti-humanity and are actually genocide. And so these students have asked, and made a point to emphasize and bring awareness to the fact that they want not only our government to cease from supporting the state of Israel, as it wages this so-called war, which seems like it's a war on civilians and not, various, insurgents or terrorists that they claim it is, but they want them to cease, their support, to the state of Israel, and they also want the colleges that they attend to divest from various interests that support the government and the state of Israel while they're engaged in these activities. And so they have been doing all sorts of actions, but mainly, setting up barricades, if you will, and having a presence on campus. That has been something that that both sides of the aisle, in terms of politicians, have not appreciated. And I believe and know that they don't appreciate it. That their stance, because our government here in the United States of America has been bought and paid for, by Israeli, and Zionist interests. And so we're going to get into that today.
Okay. Okay.
So now, and again, one of the tricks that they've been doing, or I should say the trick, but the strategy is to build sort of encampments on campus. So they're doing with tents and supplies, and like you said, there's a lot of disruption, there's a lot of protesting, but it's for the most part it's been peaceful, at least on their side of it. I understand that in one of the places, I don't know if it was Ohio or whatever, that it was Columbia, where they called the police on them, and the police physically went in there and removed the tents and the people and forced them and did some type of things real physical, and all it did was just garner more support. So the numbers ended up doubling, and they come back there with just I guess blankets or whatever, or sleeping bags, and just ultimately all it did was inspire many different college campuses to have the same type of of attack, of
Right.
political gathering. And in some places, they've actually, the administrations of these colleges have actually capitulated. They've actually given them, they said, this is what you want, these are your terms, we're going to give you those terms. So it actually has succeeded in some places. So there's something to be said about protesting and organizing peacefully, and making sure that your voice is heard, and making sure that you at least can present your position in an intelligent fashion. And we should be very careful to understand that this is not a bash on Jewish people. It's not a bash on people that live in Israel, Israeli citizens. It's
Right.
really about the ideology of the execution of how this is being done, as it is impacting citizens of Palestine, of Gaza, as opposed to militants. So and you're going to find support from Jewish people. You're going to find support for Jewish people in Israel. So it's not just black and white, like this is now
Yeah.
Palestinians versus Jews. That's really not what it is. It's the issue of the powers that be that are perhaps not managing this onslaught improperly. And when I say perhaps, they're absolutely not. It's atrocious that civilians are taking the hits that they're taking because particular strategists or militants did what they did. I mean, always say that the government only represents the government. You have 20 people that make decisions and make power. Those are the people that are doing the things. Those are the people that are actually waging war. The people that are at home, that are just basically, going to work and not doing anything about this, they may play a role in it to the extent that they vote these people in. But, the people that are pulling these strings are the people that are often cross these lines. And those are the people that really need to be held accountable.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about this actually in the last show, and I'm glad we're getting the chance to actually expand upon it a little bit here. And I actually have a question, and we talked about the peaceful protests that's taking place on the college campus, and we saw that the support has actually doubled. Is there a benefit and this is, I guess this would be controversial in this question. Would there be a benefit of a more radical approach? In terms of these protesters, is that something we look at? As we know, like even the foundation of this country with the Boston Tea Party, radical approaches sometimes even brings in more results because of the fact that there's a dire need to impart change. Any thoughts in regards to maybe that would you, I don't think there's a yes or no answer to that, but I think sometimes to be a little bit more radical sometimes can impart change a little bit quicker.
Right. So if I could chime in on that, and I would say that there is room for a more radical approach. And let me say this. So as much support as I have for what the Israelis have done, or not the Israelis, but to what the students have done thus far in regards, to this issue, I think indeed, there have been indeed mistakes, if you will, that have been made. And when I say mistakes, I'm saying that from a position of ultimately what I would like to see these protesters, do is to embrace strategies and tactics that will be more all-encompassing and bringing in others to this particular movement instead of making this an echo chamber and making it something that just is for people that, look like them, if you will, or share their exact same values. And because this issue is bigger than just them, you know what I mean? And so, and when I say mistakes have been made, I'll give you an example. So one of the mistakes I feel that has been made, is that, out there inside of North Carolina, on the campus, basically something has started, in regards, to the protesters removing a flag. There was a flag that was the American flag was flying at half mast for the 4 Charlotte police officers that were brutally killed in the line of duty. I don't know if you guys had caught that inside the news, but they were serving a warrant and whatnot, and just were viciously gunned down by criminals and whatnot. So the flag was at half mast, and so the protesters had pulled the flag down, replaced it with a Palestinian flag, and lift that up, which sparked a group of a fraternity brothers, there inside UNC. When I say brothers, white, from what I can see, but they went and defended, that position, got the American flag back, put it up, and then, stood there, having, insults, yelled at them and whatnot, different things, started to pop off, but they held their ground. And so then a GoFundMe page was set up, for them in that situation, and then within 24 hours, they had already raised over $200,000. And to date, it's well over $500,000, that have been donated, to these individuals, and their defense of that flag, if you will, which also turned into more of a pro-Israel, the way it's been billed as a pro-Israel support, as well, so to me, like tactics like that, a strategy like that is not something that you could pull in more patriotic, if you will, Americans, who some of which on the opposite end of the aisle, is not for, not necessarily Israel defending itself, but they're not for the funding, and sending massive amounts of resources out of America to this effort, getting us involved and nor putting boots on the ground in this conflict. They rather have our focus be right here at home, So, there's a way to where, if the protesters were focused on, again, bringing in a larger segment of people, to support them, and support these actions, I would look at that as being a good thing and not necessarily a bad thing, and that's radical in and of itself, because what the enemy, of us all does not want to see, and it's something that is absolutely mission critical that is not achieved, is a certain level of unity. You see what I'm saying? And because ultimately our problems and our challenges has to do with the government itself, and a lot of decisions that are being made that is not in the best interest of the greater American people, the American public and this nation, but it's more aligned on what's in their best interest, and who funds their campaigns and who puts money into their coffers, to send their children, to college and amass wealth. I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic.
I mean, you pretty much expressed a lot of things that I thought, so I really don't need to regurgitate it. I mean, I'll say this: when I think of when you first posed the question about radical solutions, I kind of interpret that as having more of a heavy hand about of doing it.
Yeah.
And my position about the heavy hand is, I feel like in order for you to pursue a heavy hand in any situation to address a problem, you need to be doing that in a position of power. Because if you're not in a position of power, you're basically probably going to make problems worse for yourself. So you have to be strategic. It's sort of like Hamas. Hamas may have, who knows how we're going to look at this after the fact. But if Hamas wanted to do something to Israel with the October attack to accomplish something, I mean, they've lost way more than they at least outrightly gained. Maybe what they gained was more support. So again, it depends
that's
how
debatable, brother. We're gonna come back to that. You know what I mean?
okay,
That's
so
debatable.
yeah. Well, I'm just talking about you. You talk about how we're talking about the loss of lives. If we're complaining about how things are being executed and bad things are happening and terrible, I'm just saying that they did something that was a catalyst to a great catastrophe. And I'm just saying that I don't know if that I could see that as a win outside of support, outside of sympathy. If that's what you're if that was the nuclear button that you were trying to press, I think there's an argument there. But when you're talking about the infrastructure, the actual cities, things that were actually destroyed by this, I mean, I don't think that the Hamas launch, I don't think that, if you want to call it a counterstrike, you want to counterstrike, whatever you want to call it, I don't think it was successful at all.
Right.
So
So let's deal with that. And so allow me to make some comments on that, and then I definitely want to hear what Brother Vic has to say. So there's two ways to look at this. And I look at it from the understanding of knowing that Hamas was created by Israel first and foremost. That's a fact that gets lost in this whole a dialogue. Oftentimes, Hamas was to be something that was a counter, to the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, back in the day, that was led by Arafat, that was absolutely a thorn, in the side of Israel, from a military resistance, standpoint, and by them creating Hamas, they being Israel has some influence over Israel. So there's a question on if Israel itself, not only allowed this attack to happen, but they were in fact behind actually the attack itself, because what they really been focused on is the Palestinians had claimed, and because it was in their territory right off the West Bank, a massive oil field, if you will, inside the sea that was discovered. And so, construction of that and accessing that wealth was at hand, or at least on the dawn of it being extracted, and so, it looks like what Israel wanted to do was to be able to seize that amount of wealth that was going to go to the Palestinians, seize it for themselves, while also, their ultimate goal was always to, to take all of Palestine, and call it Israel at the end of the day, so, did they in fact themselves orchestrate this, but the flip side of the coin is that whether they let it happen or not, the fact is that through these actions, and there's been a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and outright lies that's been told by Israel in terms of how this attack went, the precision of it, and what they targeted and what they accomplished in the attack. And there was no rapes, if you will, or grapes, if you will, of others, of innocent civilians and whatnot that was done from the Palestinian part. That's been proved to be a lie, time and time again. But the precision of it.
That.
Oh no, it's been proven. That could be a whole other show, but it's been proven there was not, these so-called grapes and whatnot that were taking place.
You can assert that it didn't happen. You can suggest evidence to suggest that it didn't happen. I'm just saying you couldn't possibly know what, even if you have people that you send out troops that you respect, these are your family members, there's whatever, they go out and do something that you don't personally observe, you don't know. So I'm just saying that it is impossible. It is impossible to prove that these things didn't happen. You know what I'm saying?
So what I'm going by is that what Israel themselves has said had happened when they said it happened, and then as forensic information and material, as well as eyewitnesses, as well as video evidence and whatnot, came to the forefront. It's been proven that what they asserted was an outright lie altogether. You know what I mean? Now, are there some other instances that are out there that took place? I don't believe so at all. You know what I mean? And there have been some assertions, but again, once the liar is uncovered and the deceiver is made known, and then they come back with some more information, you have to question the law at that point. You know what I mean? That's exactly what took place in this situation. But that was not my point. My main point, was, at the end of the day, this attack, that they being Hamas has done, it has unified the practically, to a degree, now not all the various nations, but it has unified, many different organizations to simultaneously now being engaged with Israel, and Israel is taking massive losses, not only from, or from their own troops, and territories being hostage, but you're talking about many Israeli citizens have left because, there's a war zone, in particular inside of the north. So the gross domestic product, has shrunk. The Houthis are successfully, the Houthis being, Ansar Allah, that's their real name. They've successfully have deterred shipments, coming in, to that area, which is forcing, now for a longer, more expensive route to take place to getting supplies, to Israel. That has impacted, Israel and others, inside of the region. Israel, in response to, the actions against Hamas, made an attack against Iran, who absolutely responded brilliantly. It was mentioned that, someone has said, I think it was you, Brother Knight, that how can Iran have claimed that was successful when 99%, of their drones and whatnot were destroyed? Well, that was by design. It was a brilliant tactic that they used those cheaper, slower drones to track the missile systems, and then Iran sent them ballistic missiles that hit every one of the targets that they attended and caused great damage to Israel. Is not being reported very much at all, if at all, in mainstream media here in the West. But it absolutely, has been being shown across the greater world, and particularly inside the BRICS nations. Now Russia, Russia, China, and Iran and North Korea, are more closely aligned more than ever. Inside this, in regards to, not only each other, and then and being against the West. But also against Israel, herself. The Chinese ambassadors came out, made very critical, comments in regards to what's taking place inside Israel. None of this was going on prior to the attack, is my point. You see what I'm saying? So this attack has garnered, now civil unrest here inside the United States, where now, a hot button topic, and deal with the Democrats, where they have the most, the most debate amongst themselves now, is in regards to this conflict. And now Joe Biden's political future is at risk because of his actions, in regards of supporting Israel in this situation. It's highly unlikely he's going to win this election. Highly unlikely, just if not only just because of this action right here. There's others now, other things that his administration has done and not done that's contributing to the fact that he is losing by massive numbers to Trump in many national polls now. But I saw that to say is it can be argued that this attack by Hamas has been a great victory for them. Now, when you look at the human cost and toll, then you're absolutely right. There have been over 30,000 civilians, mostly women and children, who have been brutally killed. But at the same time, it also exposed the savagery, the wickedness, the demonic traits of the state of Israel, and what they have done, and has also
as
exposed
as
some.
as as governed by Netanyahu.
Well, no, I mean, he's not. I mean, he's the head, but there's still, people who have. We've all saw videos. Not maybe we all, but there's been plenty of footage of in the middle of these attacks and this genocide, of seeing Israeli soldiers celebrating and dancing and singing and frolicking around while there's massive death and casualties around them, running over, driving civilians, shooting people in the back, killing children. You know what I mean? The world is seeing these images. And so for the large part, the whole world has turned against Israel. Israel has never, I remember coming into the Savior's Day address that the minister did, back in late February, which is when that Savior's Day always takes place. The minister has been accused of being a leading anti-Semite, in America, for a long, long time now as a black man, so-called black man, but when he came and delivered this lecture, he's never delivered this lecture in an environment, like it is, today, and what it was even then a few months ago, to where the whole world was against Israel and still against Israel. You know what I mean?
It's against Israel's campaign. I won't say the whole world is against Israel.
No. Well, I'm saying, when I say the whole world, I'm saying that if you just look at the BRICS nations alone, the BRICS nations alone, which, if anyone doesn't know, BRICS stands for Brazil, help me out, Russia, not India, China, and who am I missing? South Africa. You know what I mean? And of course, there's been many others that's expanded and come into the coalition. And now Saudi Arabia is there, and others, Iran. If you look at the GDP, of these BRICS nations, man, they kill, the various alliances that the West, and particularly that America, has with, her allies. It's not even close.
See, here's the thing about it. When you say this, your allies are your allies, and the people that weren't your allies before, I mean, they just, you talk about garnering support. I think you're absolutely right as far as garnering support for this particular thing. But again, those people that weren't their allies were never championing their cause. So as long as you're maintaining your allies, that's really kind of not the issue. I mean, but I do agree with you. That's why I said, if you want to talk about from a support standpoint, this whole thing has absolutely been, at least if nothing else, terrible PR for them. You know what I'm saying? That's just a fact.
Right, and that's an understatement. It's worse than terrible PR. I mean,
that's why I said at least. I said at a minimum, but I'm just talking about when we talk about the loss of life and infrastructure. Those people have been hit, far more heavily as far as relational.
Yeah. And they will be looked at as martyrs inside this situation.
And that's what I'm saying.
For sure.
That's what you lean into. That's definitely going to be the thing that's going to be how you color. And that's what I was talking about. I was saying how history will look back at this. There's something to be said there. But I'll also say that, there's a little bit of a smell test in some of this stuff. I understand that you are a brother that has a lot of information that supports the positions that you take. But I will say that, you have way more faith in that material than it probably deserves to have. I'm not saying that I have faith in the material that I'm exposed to. I don't. But that's the point. I don't have faith in either of our material. And I'm just saying that this is, if I will always keep the context of what you read and what I read, is that this is what this position is asserting. This is what that position is asserting. What I'm not going to tell you is what's actually happening in something place that I'm not actually seeing for myself to know what's going on. So
I understand your point.
That's why I do that. So I'm not disputing you to say that,
sure,
it's a bad for you to take that position. I'm just commending you for why you do that. You're doing it with a lot of data and statistics behind it. But I do have a lot of scrutiny for that information, and that's why I can't just accept it.
And I don't even have full complete time to even go about how the whole methodology behind it, because I want to turn over to Brother Vic to respond as well. But just real briefly is that, when I'm taking data, I'm taking a lot of data information from people who are, indeed have proven to be experts in their subject matter and content, and has proven through the years to give accurate and reliable information from all the sources, and data that they have. And I also read and take in lots of data, from not only, those that might support a position that I lean towards, but also, the flip side of the coin is what's being said, on the other side, of that coin. You see what I'm saying? And then through that process of analyzing and whatnot, then yes, I am able to come, to my conclusions, and I will say is that through the years, if I can't say so myself, maybe this is my superpower, going back to that mutant, gene, is that I have been more right than wrong, through the years, a lot of my analysis. But I believe it's not because it's me, it's just because of the process and the strategy I've adopted, that leads me, to my understanding. But Brother Vic, what do you have to say on this?
And before you say something, Vic, I will just say that propaganda goes both ways. So you
Well,
got to
that's what I'm saying.
understand.
I don't rely on propaganda. I like to deal with facts, statistics. You know what I mean? Again,
we can call it facts. We can call it statistics. But I'm just saying that it's being generated and created from some source, and there's a presumption that it's being generated accurately. I'm just saying that there are major players in the way that the United States, the CIA manipulates and sends out information. I'm just saying that stuff happens from the other side too. So you'll get these reports that make these assertions. You'll see videos that make these assertions, but that doesn't make them right or true. So I'm just
that's true. But remember, so a part of my methodology is I rely on, and this is a beautiful age that we live in now, is through social media. Real live people like you and I, that's not, part of government institutions and agencies that are being impacted by various situations, they're reporting, giving us on the ground, actual facts, real time situation data through their lens and through their eyes that we're able to observe, and gather content, from, and we never had that before. And so by me having that part of my process, using different, not more Twitter, if you will, X, so to speak, since we're talking about the X gene, X, being able to access information from these real live people, it definitely heavily influenced, and I lean on that information more than I would, let's say data coming from a government who might be, downplaying how many soldiers they lost, or exaggerating, this maybe civilian, the tolls of conflicts that are involved in. You see what I'm saying?
Hopefully you remember what you was about to say, Vic.
No. There's a lot of great topics and points that you guys are both making. One of the things that you talked about, Thomas, in terms of like there's propaganda on both sides. I can say for myself candidly, whenever something had occurred between the Palestinians as well as Israelis, I always took the Israeli side. I always did, and I think some of that kind of comes with the media and just the conditioning. This is like the very first time that I really started to kind of look into from the Palestinian side, and you see atrocities on both ends. And one of the reasons why, and I'm getting a one-sided look at this, but it's the first time that I've actually gotten it. I actually worked with two women by chance. They're both Palestinian. So I'm hearing, things even before the Hamas attack, just like what their perspective was. And granted, I'm not having conversations with Jewish people, but at my place of employment. And then, as you would know, the context of like what we're talking about at work, it probably, stems on the line of just making sure that it's appropriate. But brother, student X kind of talked about as well as just like the misinformation that, in their opinion, was always kind of put out about the Palestinians, and I never thought about it. And all the images always were from a standpoint of like kids throwing rocks, and we're attacking the Israel unfairly, and then they would mention the genocide that has occurred, the death that was inflicted by Israel. But we also know the Palestinians have done that to Israel as well. But I would say, and again, I'm speaking for myself, all right? This was like the first time I actually looked at it from their point of view, because in the past, I just automatically thought to myself, you know, oh, is Israel, they're the victims here, and then so they definitely have taken a hit to their image, because it's not just here in the U.S. Has been noted, around the world, people are starting to like side to the Palestinians, and that speaks to people maybe looking at this a little bit differently, and that's the only thing that I would really add to this conversation. I think you guys really have hit on a lot of different points to this, and people are definitely going to pick a side one way or the other. But I think it's fair to say that, you know, as we have seen it probably in our lifetime, automatically people would just always say, like, Israel are the good guys and they're wearing the white hats, and the Palestinians are wearing the black hats. I think that's for me, that's how, I came up, and that's how the media kind of portrayed it. Now you're kind of looking at it differently.
And
Um,
and that's the angle that will be shown when you're quote unquote dealing with your allies. So and then
right,
that's why I understand what Brother Student X is talking about. The
yeah,
media, you know, the media. I don't think that the media is puppeteered and controlled like some people do. I really do think that a lot of our media here. I mean, I know that that's the case in nations where they have absolute control over stuff like that. I think that a lot of the stuff that here is done with financial interests. And if the government is able to incentivize with financial, then that would basically be their way of accomplishing the very thing that you're accusing them of. But it's I have a somewhat of a conflict. I've always understood the flip side. As a Hebrew Israelite, one thing about me, if you know me, I'm a religious person. I'm not even. It's never in the front. It's fundamentally what I'm about. But I don't interact with people religiously. Many people think that I'm an atheist. Because for the most part, I try to keep everything. I forget what the term is. I use the term all the time, but I'm forgetting now. But it's basically the term that's anti-religious. What I'm
but
saying? That's how I That's how I interact.
Agnostic.
Not agnostic. It's a word that refers to I keep things out of religious context. I keep things like very simple math. It's going to come back to me. I'm telling you,
okay,
I use this word all the time, and for whatever reason, it escapes me. But the bottom line is, I always try to relate and deal people on a common level, and I always try to do things fundamentally, because I understand that the thing about religion or belief. You're already there. You have this belief. If they don't have this belief, there's going to be that disconnect. So I always try to connect with people on secular. That's the word that I use.
secular, okay.
Whenever I
Okay,
interact with
that's what I was
people,
going next.
I,
Yeah.
I do it on a secular level. So
Hmm.
that's what I'm saying. So my religion hardly ever comes into any discussion or whatever that we're talking about. So and that's one of the big conflicts of this situation. And again, even though I'm a Hebrew Israelite, that doesn't mean that I necessarily buying into the Jewish claim to the Hebrew Israelite, heritage or rights. You know what I'm saying? So
Well, you can't by definition. You know what I
well,
mean?
but I'm just saying it. But I'm just saying it. That's why, But I still fundamentally believe that Israel belongs to people that identify as Israelites. I mean, I do believe that that's God given. But I understand the
Who are not
conflict.
those who are claiming that title today.
And that's one of the craziest things about it. When you're telling me that people that are not absolutely, they don't even believe in this, that they're not secular, they're atheists, or they don't believe in, how can you possibly construct a claim to this land based on a religious God claim? I mean, it's kind of a ridiculous assertion and position to take. But I don't want to get too much in that, because I also feel like this, notwithstanding what anybody may particularly own. I'm a homeowner, me and my wife, so we own this particular property. But notwithstanding, my faith is that all of us, all of humanity, owns every spot of the world. We all own it all. You know what I'm saying? I don't just own this quarter. I understand I stake a claim to this, and then I pay taxes on this. And if someone tries to violate it, I'll defend it however it is. But for all intents and purposes, we have a responsibility to share all of the world, all the world's resources, all the people, with the animals that occupy this. We are shepherds of them. So it is our position as the sort of like the apex thing that can influence everything, to influence it in a proper way, in a righteous way. So that having said, those people, they had access to that land. That was the land that they occupied before, and they have rights to land, and I get it. I'm just saying it's just a nasty conflict of interest. But what there is no conflict of interest about is when you analyze the atrocities that are being done. And I don't have to deal with the whether they should be over there. I don't have to deal with it. All I have to deal with the fact that you're killing civilians.
Right.
to get at these militants. And that, there's just no excuse for that. We can go to the whole Sodom and Gomorrah. You don't have to believe in this story, but like literally, like if there's 10 people, is it no, no, no. If there's 9 people, I'm sorry to keep bugging you. Is there 8 people? That's just not how God works. So it's just not okay for other people to get swept up in your thing. So that's what's up.
Yes, yeah, and I'll pick up where you left off. Is that I like to remind people of how we got here. You know what I mean? And and I don't start 2,000 years ago because, in truth, and this is actual facts, 2,000 years ago, the people who were recognized as being, Hebrews then are not the people who are recognized as Hebrews today. You know what I mean? By the masses, if you will. So then basically we had to go back to 1947, where the United Nations adopted Resolution 181, known as a partition plan, which sought to divide the British Mandate of Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. And so then that's when, and of course that action was backed by, America and other allies, where people then were, sent in to colonize an area that they were not from, had not been there, at all, unless again, they took a little passage out the Bible, that claimed that through this passage in the Bible, that this gives them a mandate to come to this land and be able to occupy it. And since then, there has not been peace inside of that region, at all, and so I like to remind people that, if you, especially as so-called Black people, it, to me is pretty contradictory, to, be in support of the state of Israel, knowing that they're colonizers and knowing that the same thing was done right here in regards to us in America. For those that understand, I know a lot of us assume that the majority of us came from someplace else, being Africa, and then brought over here. But, the fact is that some of that may have happened, but the majority of us was already here in America when those that came here, colonized it, and took it, what I mean? But regardless of the fact is, these are our people, the Palestinians, who were living in the land that basically had another people dropped on them, armed, and then started taking their territory and killing their people. And that's been going on since 1947. So like Vic was saying earlier, many people, have felt like Vic, in the past, to where they much more supported, Israel. They did Palestine. And now through this, in particular, this conflict that's happening now, and all the various events, including the student protests, that is bringing, more, bringing us into focus in this region more than ever as American people. Many more people are starting to lean away from Israel now and identifying with the Palestinians as being actual victims, and being done terribly wrong, in this hour. And I'll bring someone to the witness stand, someone who, I've studied, and rely on intel and information from, a former weapons inspector, a former, formerly in the ranks of the United States Marine Corps, a decorated soldier, and someone who was, known to, through the years, be someone who is, anti-war, for being pro-nuclear disarmament, and that's none other than Scott Ritter, and he's come out and he's made some, strong statements in regards, to this particular situation, and in particular as he addressed, the anti-war movement. He said that if you're not out there shoulder to shoulder with these students, then get the hell out of my life and get the hell out of America. Stop calling yourself anything other than stooges for the establishment. You know what I mean? And this is someone who used to be not only pro-Israel, but someone who used to actually supply and work with the intelligence community of Israel. You see what I'm saying? And he's, of course, made way more or many more statements and contributions, not only on this particular, situation, but the Ukraine, Russia conflict, and many other type of situations, but, Israel has been exposed. Netanyahu, of course, has been exposed. I got a shout out to Brianna Joy Gray. She's on the Hill now, which is historically been more conservative voice, but just for them to diversify, they brought her in, and she has, some she leans left a lot, but at the same time, she does has some center and right and center positions. But in regards to Netanyahu's threat, who threatened revenge if charged with war crimes by the ICC, she said, this is fascinating. This amounts basically to defense that Israel saying a response to potential ICC warrants being issued again for its conduct that it has been carrying out for years, even long before October 7th, including murders of Palestinian civilians in the West Bank as part of its illegal settlement expansion campaign, to say, if you issue warrants for my past criminal behavior, I'm going to do more criminal behavior in the West Bank. A kind of mafia is short of threat. And in the midst of all of that, you have a bipartisan American state really coming to the defense to shield Israel from any accountability under international law, arguing that it would create a slippery slope of swords that can negatively affect America leaders who also commit war crimes. I think a lot of people look at that and say, well, we want there to be accountability when you litigate an illegal war like the wars that America has been involved in for the last 20 years. So her statements are bringing out, again, the vested interest that America has, in defending Israel, not only because she too is a colonizer, both the American government as well as the Israeli, they're both colonizing, governments, but America herself, being, our government has been engaged in illegal wars for over 20 years, really. But if you just look at the last 20 years, there have been conflicts that have taken a huge toll of civilian life. The invasion of Iraq. The second one. You're talking about, at that time we had Madeleine Albright, who was the Secretary of Defense, and she's famous, for going on a live television saying that, when asked the question, was it worth the 500,000? Now, keep in mind, we're talking about 30,000 here with the Israelis. Right. America, during that tenure, when she was the Secretary of State, I believe it was Clinton at the time. I could be incorrect, but it was the president at the time. But under her tenure, you're talking about over 500,000 innocent civilians, mostly women and children, were killed in that conflict. You see what I'm saying? Illegal at that, it was brought to the American people, on false pretense and whatnot, but over 500,000 civilians, were killed in that a particular type of situation. So America understands that she's committed a lot of crimes, both presently and in the past, and so for her not to stand with Israel and allow these charges to come forth and whatnot, then now she's worried also about having, some of her own leaders being indicted, and charged, as George Bush Jr. was, for some of the crimes that he committed during his tenure as well. Let me go ahead and turn over the mic to whoever wants to address anything.
It's some real stuff. There's that always, it's never lost on me that a lot of these young people that are protesting the colonizing and all this other stuff, you're doing it on colonized soil. You're not necessarily, you're almost making an argument that they should just give up this whatever, but you're not over here trying to give up whatever that you've got in here. You fully dug into what your country is. So it seems like
let me say this. Let me come to the defense, because again, I'm right of center, and so the flip side of the point you're making, is that these protesters, they're more to the far left extreme, part of which is why they're labeled that for a lot of different reasons. But one of the arguments that they have made, and I will give it to that community, who, again, there's a lot I don't identify them with, at all, but I will give it to them that they have been, real strong in their voice about crimes that America has committed, both presently as well in the past, and then have also stated that there should be, some sort of reconciliation that is done, so, I'll give it to the LGBTQ plus. I'm sorry if I butchered that, you know what I mean? But I will give it to that community and many of our sisters who have aligned with that movement as well, for taking that stance. That's a stance that I happen to agree with them, is that absolutely there have been crimes that's been done by this country and whatnot, and there needs to be some sort of reconciliation, what that looks like, is the reparations or what is it, that could be debated and whatnot, but they are the one community who is out there. And then those who I have a lot more in common with in a lot of aspects in terms of politically being, on being right of center, they're the flip side of the coin, because not only do they not want to talk about it, they don't want us even talking about it to their children. You know what I'm saying? Making their children aware of it, which is why they've had various, some books being banned, not just the homosexual books and whatnot,
we're
but
just
books
talking
that
about this, Victor.
that happened to you and I. You know what I mean?
This is the DeSantis
and our
discussion. This is Victor.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, Victor. This was the DeSantis discussion that Victor that we were talking about.
Yeah, not DeSantis, but others. There's others in the mix too and whatnot as well. Because unfortunately, the black struggle, if you will, so-called black struggle. I always say so-called black because y'all know my feelings on this. Black is a crayon color. Black inside the law. Has no position, no standing, no territory, no nothing. So I don't identify as black, but I know when people say black, I know what they're talking about, who they're talking about. I like to use the word melanated, but even then, that's not strong enough. You know what I mean? So more. You know what I mean? It's something that it is in law. There are treaties, that exist, and that attaches us to this land, and that gives us way more of a footing to reconcile our differences with this government, and the actions of the past than any other terminology. So that's why I always say so-called black. You know what I mean? When I do address various facts.
That is the path to addressing the situation as best you possibly can. When you're talking about making up for what is done, or to whatever you can do to acknowledge what was done, but to basically I guess, I want to say soften the blow, but to basically make up for it after a fashion to the extent that you can, because we can't return the lives of our ancestors that, that were taken, or, the oppression, the terrible lives that they had to, push through just in order for them to exist and get to that point for us to be their progeny. I mean, there's been a lot of struggle just for you and me and Vic to exist. You know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of ugly things that happen, particularly, on this soil by those that, identify that are very proud and cheer and, and wave that flag. And, I mean, it's a conflict. My support for the American people, I always have some more support for the American people. I have support for people in general, but what I can't support is the ideology and the symbolism and stuff like that, because I we have a conflict of interest there.
Yeah, you talked about it, and it really raised the flag with me when you mentioned just the hypocrisy behind how each group will actually be able to see the things that are done to them, but then as you mentioned, like they're talking about stolen land, but then this is land that was stolen, upon itself. But the self-identification, interesting enough, brother student X was talking about, he really doesn't see himself as a black person, but he really more identifies himself as maybe melanated. But I think what happens is with people is they
Amor.
I'm sorry about that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry about that. But I think what people try to do is identify with a group, and then you form your opinions amongst those group, and then that will really, in a lot of ways, make you biased or slant your opinion in those ways. And it's very hard to get somebody within those groups to see things very objectively. They're subjected to that. And I think the point that I'm making here is just that, with this conflict that's ongoing, and it will continue to go long before you and I even going on this earth, is that will people really ever understand their own bias in the situation. I mean, we're seeing it like right here with the support with the Palestinians or the Israelis, but people don't really understand, like, even even on college campuses, the fact that this is land in which was stolen, or at least they don't take that into account as to, like, um, you're making a point for somebody else, but then you're not even acknowledging the world that you're in specifically. Like, this is stolen land. So to be patriotic or things like that, it comes with the knowledge that there was some wrongs that occurred, and if you're not acknowledging them, then you're not really embracing the totality of what a person's history is. I think that's overall what typically is missing here, is that people are not objective enough, and we'll continue to see this conflict not receive get to a middle ground anytime soon. That's the biggest
Absolutely.
thing that I've taken from just observing this, because since, like, when we were like 5 or 6 and we started learning about this, whether in school, here we are grown men, and it hasn't gotten any better. It hasn't. I don't know. I don't think it has. But other than the fact that we are starting to see, maybe another side to this, as to the one Israeli side that, for me at least in my schooling, that I was seeing.
Yeah,
Right.
it's funny. You talk about things getting better. I remember growing up seeing McCarthyism and thinking how crazy of a time that was. And then just to actually get to a point where we actually see that type of politics nowadays, that's semi crazy. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. What were you about to say, brother student X?
No. I was just agreeing with the brother. You know what I mean? Like, today things are definitely coming more into focus. And I want to throw a shout out to brother Yusuf. Hopefully, we could get him on the show. Here, because he always has some really great points that he makes, and you guys call me the minister of information, man. Let me tell you, man, this brother right here, he has dedicated his life to actually, finding information. You know what I mean? Some more controversial than others, as we could talk about that coin. Brother Nice. You know what I'm saying? But
I wasn't trying to say it. I was trying to. I was tempted to grab a prop, but I'm like, don't do that. Don't do that. That was not a shining moment for me on this show. Hey, the trick, the way to get brother Yusuf on this show is the link that I gave to you, the link that I gave to Victor, is to just forward that link to him, and it's just that simple.
Okay.
Okay, yes, sir. So we're going to try to get that brother in, but one thing I do want to talk about as we're talking about this subject is that, I mean, how many of us know that literally just recently, within the last a day or two ago, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act is being brought forth and looking to pass through the ranks of Congress, where basically is dealing with a topic to where anti-Semitism is going to be legally defined, if you will, and then people is a similar a reality inside of Europe in particular. You deny certain events that happen, you can literally go to jail. You know what I mean? But there's an international group that wants to define anti-Semitism as a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews, and it gives examples of definitions, applications, which includes accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, and making dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such of the power of Jews as a collective. They're looking to make this, and put this into law. Again, being able to hold people criminally responsible, for, this, so-called, anti-Semitism, and there's been various peak conservative leaders, on obviously on the right that have come forth and have basically showed that literally, like, the New Testaments in particular, or the Bible, is literally being indicted in this, because of course we all know that there's a scripture that goes on and describes people who are not Jews, but claim to be Jews that are actually, are from the synagogue of Satan.
Satan, yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And so, so there are some conservatives that are starting to get the understanding. And then I always like to remind people, I remember seeing a lot of so-called black people, came, to the defense of that Charlottesville rally, back when Trump was the president. I think it was in 2020, where it was mainly a bunch of white people that was with tiki torches marching through the streets.
2016, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, okay, yeah, 2016, yeah, they came through the streets. But the thing is that when they were marching through the streets, they wasn't saying, I hate niggas. You know what I mean? Mexicans go back to Mexico. You know what I mean? They wasn't talking about that at all. What they were saying was Jews will not replace us. Is what the slogan was, because what they saw and what many see today is that there is a Zionist influence over our government, to the tune of, while people were busy claiming that Russia was, interfering and influencing elections, we actually have had many, a lot of Israeli money, that has come into our political systems, and that's even have our politicians making pledges to the state of Israel that, whose interests many times is not aligned with those of the American people. And so the one thing that I do absolutely, appreciate and like about, certain conservatives, in particular the American First conservatives, is that their focus is on, regardless of race, creed, class, or color, let's focus on America. Let's fund various projects, in terms of infrastructure that needs to take place here in America. Let's secure our borders. Let's create jobs here, for the masses of the people. Let's focus on America, and let's not, send $100 billion package that had nothing to do with America at all, that went towards funding, and giving money and resources to not only Israel, but also Ukraine, again, not focusing on the challenges of the American people, and citizens here inside this country. Do you guys know about that?
Basically, get your house in order before you go worrying about somebody else's house. That's a fundamental sort of like biblical principle. And, again, I think there's logic and reason to both sides of the aisle about a lot of things.
I had a little problem with the, not even a little, I have a lot of problem with the anti-Semitic, I guess, definition that Dr. Brother, the student X, was talking about. Like they wanted to have it detailed. Most of the language was okay with me, but the word "real" really kind of like took me aback. and
Right.
Really took me aback when he stated that, because everything else I was like, all right, if something's imagined, you shouldn't go, make these accusations about a group or a people. But if it's real, it's real. Like, how was that anti-Semitic?
I'm glad you brought that.
How was that anti-Semitic?
Well,
that actually happened.
Well, see, I'm glad you brought that up, because when I heard it, I thought it sounded ridiculous too. But then at the very end of it, I got the gist. I don't remember the specifics. You have to go to the definition. But what it sounded like it was saying to me, that look, even if it's real that a group of Jewish people did this thing, this is not to be a reflection on the Jewish people as a totality. So that's when he said real or imagined. Yeah, is it that everybody shouldn't be attributed to the criminality of a select membership of these people as opposed to totality of the people. So I fundamentally agree with that and everything. No group of people represents everybody. A group of people only represents a group of people of you. People may interpret it and perceive it whatever, but the bottom line is you can only control what you can control. And if someone else does something, that's technically on them, So that's where I understood that. The balance of that definition specifically said something to the effect of that this gets attributed to everybody as opposed to, who it is that did it.
So similar to like how it happens to us as blacks, like if
go ahead, brother.
As opposed, like, there's a shooting that occurs. See, this is what you black people are doing. All black people are on welfare. And like the statistics are, they're actually more like white women and white men who are actually on welfare. But by and large, the media portrays it as if as if it's us. But there's really nothing that protects us or sanctions us in terms of, I don't know, anti-blacknessism.
Come on, bro, you from New York, brother? Remember Stop and Frisk?
Stop and frisk. Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
But I'm talking on the flip side of that. Like we don't have do we have,
exactly.
yeah, we don't have that. We don't have
Well,
that.
yeah,
Not
and
at
there's a
all.
lot of complaint about that because they also had the anti-Asian when it was like COVID's going on, and a lot of people were just like attacking Asian people because they sort of like associated them was the cause for this particular thing, even though it came out of Asia. It's you understand that even if this lab created it, even if this lab
Yeah.
put it out there, that's not the fault of all Asian people. It's the fault of the people that were a part of that played
Right.
a role. So that's why
Right.
that's
But
what
but
makes
we've experienced that here in this country in its totality. We do see like when 9/11 happened, right? You know, you,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
even when people just got it wrong. You wear a turban, it's like, oh, all right,
Big facts.
you're
Big
you're,
facts.
you're part of Bin Laden. You're a terrorist group. Like this, it's ridiculous. It was ridiculous. But we as black people, we was like, all right,
No
we
legislation.
were like, welcome to our world.
Yeah,
It's
you're
But
right.
but
Yeah,
but
we don't have any
this,
legislation. We don't have
right.
the
this is the
anti-black,
world.
whatever.
Yeah, anti-black.
Hey, that goes back to our title. Black don't have rights and whatnot. That's not the people at the end of the day. You see what I'm saying? So that's how they get away with it. And also again, like you said, the hypocrisy is real because going back to the COVID and the Asians and whatnot. Remember, it came about because it was Trump who came out calling it China virus. So people were getting mad about it and whatnot, and then there were some Asians that were being targeted because of, so they say, because of that rhetoric and whatnot, what I mean? But the irony is it wasn't, Asians or nor the Chinese that put Biden in office. Even the Biden campaign says it was the black woman, who at a 95% clip, that put him over the top and allowed him to come in office, and yet nothing was done, for the masses of that people, unless you consider the vice president being appointed to her role as that being, the handout, if you will, that was given to us.
I would dispute that as far as whether nothing was done. But let me answer this specific question to Brother Youssef. He says, "Who are they?" When you mention following McCarthyism, when I talk about McCarthyism, I'm talking about the line of political speak that really leans into politics, that just completely betrays logic, that doesn't just that purely uses dog whistles and things like that. Look, I'm not here to vilify Trump. There's some things that he did that I agree with. There's some things he did that I didn't agree with. But there's one thing that is a constant to me about this about Mr. Trump, is that even though I think he is a useful politician for the right, that's just a reality. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to be a perfect person to still be a better option than the other guy if this person leans into your policy. So I completely get it. It is a rational and logical position to support him as the alternative if his policies align up with yours. But there's one thing that you can't dispute, is that this dude talks like a kindergartner. His logic is kindergartner logic. He you know what I'm saying? It's just when you're talking about, he makes false correlations that just don't hold up to adult communication.
For
And then,
example,
okay, let's talk about for example, let's talk about when Trump talks about, it's funny that you say that. It's good that you put me on the spot about this, because I mean, it's just sort of like I'm so used to it, I literally just kind of ignore it. That I'm saying that it's just I just try to move on.
take your time, think about it. We'll come back to it, but
No,
definitely.
I'm saying examples that I can talk about when he says things like, I have a gag order, so now I can't even testify in court. I can't even say nothing. This is like whatever, and it's sort of like, come on, dude. You understand that the gag order is strictly about function of, you just can't talk to the other people. You don't have to basically say, okay, I'm guilty. I understand that you want to defend yourself. You can defend you talk about E. Jean Carroll, whatever her name is. He can basically say, look, she says that this happened. That didn't happen. That doesn't get him trouble to say that that didn't happen. What got him in trouble was all the extra piling in and all of this stuff. And I'm just saying it, look, you got to understand how to get out of your own way. For 4 years, you were very fine with saying, I'm not going to release my tax information because I'm in an audit. It's the same logic. Look, there's certain things that you can't do because you're in a trial or you whatever. Just be a grown up and don't do that. You know what I'm saying? But he's like throwing a fit. So when I think about McCarthyism, when I talk about McCarthyism, you want an example of it? It'd be like the kneeling. He's a person that really leaned into the whole kneeling phenomenon when he was talking about, you're not American, you're blah 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 and such and whatever. And I'm like, look, hold up. There's one thing for me to be American citizen and me to care about other American citizens, which I do. I care about all American citizens, even the ones that hate me. But the bottom line is, I still don't identify with your Jolly Roger because that's what that thing is to me. I will never put my hand over my heart. I will never kneel to that thing. As a Christian, I understood the concept of idolatry. That's what that is. I mean, there's no skating around it. So when I talk about McCarthyism, I'm talking about where just because you don't line up with this type of thought, he vilifies you and makes you the enemy of such. Whereas it's just like it's okay for people to have conflicts of interest. Just because I don't see eye to eye, that don't make me a monster. It don't make you a monster. It just
Right.
makes it different. So that's an example.
One of the things I would say about Trump is that he is a simplistic speaker from the standpoint, but he's definitely strategic and calculated with what he says and what he does.
No doubt.
He has he does a lot of virtual signaling. So one of the things Brother Student X kind of talked about, like the Charlottesville thing, and one thing I do kind of disagree when he mentioned about during that protest, they did just mention like they didn't want to be I'm talking about the
replaced.
I'm talking about the fact that they were mentioning that alt-right group. That alt-right group is a self-proclaimed, white supremacist group. And what Trump does is instead of completely denying them, he gives them fuel. He'll say things to the effect of, there's good people on both sides. Or like during the presidential debate on the last one, where out of nowhere he's asked a question in regards to like, is he racist? Is he racist? And he doesn't answer the question. And not only does he not answer the question, he talks about the Proud Boys. And that's very calculated. Do we know that he dated a black woman? Do we know that he has black friends? Do we know that his interests typically are about those who are just, wealthy and those who will like feed his ego in terms of being a narcissist? You could be black and that can actually happen and he'll be okay with it. Yes, we know all the things, but at the same time, he definitely knows who his audience is and he speaks to that. And for us, for anybody to take the position where, words are words and they don't mean anything. And all he did was tweet, negative things, but, the world was so much better, really doesn't understand how the world works. I mean, entire wars have been over words. People get into fights, as we grew up over words. Words are very powerful. And in those words, that is where he, in my opinion, even though he is a simplistic speaker, he's very calculated in what he says and when he does in his movement and making sure that he says the things that his base will follow. He is a New Yorker. He was born and raised. People forget that. And I lived in the South. I lived in Oklahoma and I lived in Texas. And, generally when I was in the South and I would start talking, them like, oh man, you sound like one of those people from the North. I'm like, yeah, I'm from New York. Oh, they would call me a Yankee, and I would find out that those were like fighting words. And I'm like, really? That those are fighting words? They don't even know me. But in their thought process, me being from the North and being from New York, that symbolized that I must be a liberal. I must be a person who believes in getting free stuff. All these things were associated with just being from New York. All right. Do you know how much a guy from New York who's running for president has to say things from a standpoint that people from Mississippi and Alabama embrace him as if he's a person from Alabama, even though being a white person, everything that he says talks to those hidden corners of people who make these speculations and have these biased opinions about us. And that's my biggest problem with him. If he didn't do that, I probably would like him actually more so than most other presidential candidates that have existed.
Well, let's talk about that, brother. I love the points that you made right there. And so, here's how I look at it. And I think you and I had talked about this subject real briefly before, but we never really got into it. So let's get into it now.
Okay.
Is the thing that the way I interpret, what you said, I have no disagreement with the fact that he might speak simplistic, but he's not simplistic. He's actually brilliant, in a lot of different ways, and very highly intelligent. I think there are various articles that even said, I think there's various articles that expose his real IQ. Like it's extremely high. So he's no dummy at all. But just like you and I know for myself. Let me speak for myself. When I speak, I have a constituency. Okay. I've been what we would call a laborer inside the Nation of Islam.
Okay.
I work among many different cultures and people, including a lot of white people and whatnot, who I truly respect, have, admiration for some, but when I want to talk to a segment of society, in particular those who I identify with, there's language that you will hear to where they know who I'm talking to. And they know who I am, even though I might be talking amongst a vast group of individuals and whatnot, and that's showing, a level of respect, and being able to communicate to multiple different, people, parties, institutions, simultaneously, as we speak, so again, what I remember and have an understanding of, which is obvious, Trump is white, he's a white guy, and I don't, it doesn't offend me that white people have some concerns in regards to their own genetic frailty.
Amen.
To the fact that they know that they're in a hostile environment among melanated people. I'm saying? That as a man, who is a white man who has a wife who produce white children. And then your children go off, and then they fall in love with a darker individual, a melanated individual, and they have children. Those children are no longer going to look like you. That's a true. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing brought up. Much of this. So it's a legitimate concern that I can see white folks having. At the end of the day, so I'm not offended by that, nor am I offended that from a cultural standpoint, we have challenges that exist within our own communities, some of which do have roots and origins and racism itself, no doubt about it, but the unfortunate term racist and racism, and discrimination, is used much like how a lot of these so-called Jews, use the word anti-Semite. It's used way too loosely. Even to me.
I hate the etymology of the actual word.
Right. Go ahead.
You should just say anti-Jewish. Don't say anti-Semite. That's
exactly.
Semitic people are way more encompassing than just Jewish people. It's an insult. It's a biblical insult, but still, yeah.
We're Semitic. I'm saying? It's white people. So how can we be anti ourselves and whatnot and everything? But again, so when Trump, he does have a base. Obviously, white people who share some of his concerns and their concerns as a whole collective, part of which is, when you have a border that obviously a lot of melanated people are coming across, I can understand that that's a concern there. So, I'm not going to be offended that that's a concern that they have. You know what I mean? It's not a concern of mine. You know what I mean? My concern is in regards of, you know, criminals coming across that border, regardless of race, color, and creed, you know, and how that impacts, you know, our society in general. You know what I mean? That's where I could share, you know, removing my emotions aside, where I could share, you know, and, you know, their position in terms of wanting to have stronger border security and whatnot. You know what I mean? Is you know, maybe our motivations are a little different for sure. You know what I mean? But yet, you know, in a sense, you know, when you look at this in a vacuum, you know, removing the emotion out of it, it's still important even for our community? How does it impact jobs? How does it impact resources that are being, you know, divided amongst the people, you know, in a nation that really is having a lot more challenges than a lot of us really want to admit? You know what I mean? You know, so the language and whatnot he deals with. I heard it was oh man, who was the judge who turned on Trump? You know, I can't think of his name.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that was the
you know what I'm talking
about. The beers. The dude was drinking beers. Bar. You talking about Bar?
Yeah, Bar. So Bar, he was asked recently who he was going to vote for, and he was being interviewed by CNN. He came out and said Trump, and it was like, what, Trump? All the negative, bad things he said about you, and this, that, and the other, whatnot. And he was like, look, man, you know, I'm putting emotions aside. You know, when I look at the options that we have, you know what I mean, and what one side is supporting and what the other side is supporting, I'm looking at, I just remove my emotion out the side, and the positions Trump has is better for myself, what I believe the future of America, you know what I mean, you know, in this nation, you know, so I'm not going to get caught up in the person, you know what I mean, I got to go ahead and support him because of the policies that he's embracing. Trump still took a couple shots at him and whatnot and everything, but he removed the emotion out of it. So my last thing I would say is that we have this saying inside the Nation of Islam. In fact, it's not just a saying. It's literally, we have a whole book that's dedicated to teaching us how to rise above emotions into the thinking of God. A whole book, you know what I mean, that breaks this down, the emotions, you know what I mean, and just start really looking at, you know, facts, you know what I mean, and how to navigate, you know, based on, make decisions based on removing emotion out the equation and looking at the nuts and bolts of a situation, you know, and to make the proper decision.
And I would like to add on that to Victor to say that to me, I always respect that sometimes you just have a conflict of interest. And I think that everyone should have a right to defend their own particular interests, even if they're in conflict with others. So to me, even though white supremacists may not think much about me, you know, to me, I still care about them having a place to live. I care about their children living, they're eating, you know, fundamental things. I feel that all human beings deserve fundamental human things, regardless of what their opinions are, and even culturally, if they think the way that they think, whatever. Now, obviously, once that is a real conflict where you're talking about bombing and
right.
violence and
like that, hurting me and mine, you know, we got a problem.
Now the conflict rises to another level. Exactly. Just like how I'm going to support Farrakhan, who's going to basically rub a lot of people a certain ways. I'm okay if they support their equivalent of Farrakhan. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, I'm just saying.
But
I would equate Trump with the equivalent of the
well,
minister.
I'm just saying that, but I'm saying that I'm talking about, but I'm talking about as a person that champions their individual interests.
There you go. I see.
That a person is very resistant outside of that.
Agree.
But we've seen seeds of that people have been influenced by this rhetoric. In Virginia, where that young kid came in and shot up. What was it? Virginia, was in South Carolina. He came in and he shot up church. He shot up the church, and then we could go up to Buffalo.
Charleston. Yeah, that's mental illness right there, brother.
Let me speak. Then we went up to Buffalo. We saw that happened again, and then we in Florida just recently. Same thing, and they all had the same thing in common. And these are like young people. These are young people. You know, that they got caught up politicizing their life, and really not only just politicizing, making Black people and people of minority the target. So that's why I harp on the fact that words are powerful, And
Yeah.
not
But
only
you think
words
that it's Trump's
counsel.
fault that
No,
that
no, no.
happened?
You
You
know,
think
wait, wait,
Trump
wait, wait.
influenced
You
that?
got to understand, brother student X. This is what he's saying. That it, if there's certain things that you say and do it out in the public that will have an influence and an impact,
But that's
regardless
my
of what your
question. That's my
intention.
question to the brother. So the
And
brother thinks that Trump had an influence
when
over
you
those
Yes,
have
but
individuals
yes,
he just
but
great
mentioned.
power, with great power comes
he
great
outwardly would not
responsibility.
denounce some of these groups, for one. Two, the virtue signaling, you know, like the Proud Boys and the alt right groups, you know, and then you know, even the kneeling. Like it's things that will get you wrapped up into groups of people that will share your like interests of hatred, you know, and then it's governed by a person that shares my opinion who happens to be the president at the
Right.
time.
So let me address that. So just like I wouldn't assign those individuals' actions, to Trump, nor I feel the same way on the flip side of the coin, to where we've had these various transgenders, come out and commit mass shootings themselves. I mean, these are individuals who are emotionally disturbed, some of which are on various medications from big pharma, maybe even using illicit drugs as well, and who have mental health issues, that commit these type of crimes and whatnot. I don't believe that Joe Biden had any more of an impact on them than Trump had on, some of the individuals that you had named.
Hey,
We're just
have you,
dealing with emotionally disturbed
hey,
people,
hey, do you know what?
that commit those crimes.
Do you know what a sim game is? A sim, SIM.
Yes, sir.
So the bottom line is
Simulator.
yeah, simulate. But it's the bottom line is you dump some variables into this situation and you see how the fallout plays out. And I'm just saying that, we have to be judicious with our words and our messages, because we understand that there are some people that are not as intelligent enough or responsible enough or decent enough, or however you want to describe it, enough to know better or to do better. I won't say what people don't know. Everybody should know better, but they won't do better. And I'm just saying that, you can't yell fire in a theater, and there's certain things that it's not healthy to put out there the way it is, because you will be triggering and having this impact on people like those guys. So again, what an individual does, they're the one that's ultimately responsible for what they
Right.
do. But when you pick and choose your actions, you have
Yeah.
scenarios where if you do scenario A, maybe 20 people die, but if you do scenario B, maybe there's 15 people die. And just on that basis alone, I would tend to say that that alternative B is the better way to go. And when
Yeah.
we talk about communication and putting stuff out there in the ether and all of this stuff, I
Yeah.
mean, it matters. You do have a responsibility. You just can't just
You,
say
you,
anything.
right, and this is that's the point that I'm making. I know, brother, actually, you're making a point that you can't blame these people for what they do. I would use a personal example. I was in Florida recently at a business meeting. There was an active shooter in Tampa. I'm a manager of a big pharmaceutical company. All right. Um, in that situation, I learned very quickly that, one, we don't have the security that we really need in this building, and two, I was responsible of a group of people on the drop of a dime that whatever I had to say and do, they were going to hang on to my every word. All right. If in that event I showed, I don't know, fear, if I showed indecisiveness, I would have lost the group. I would have lost the group. And I knew that in those moments, I had to say the right things to at least bring bring their feelings to a calm, so to say. And I did everything possible in doing that. You don't get on camera with microphones in front of your face as the leader of the new world and say that there are good people on both sides when you're put in that position. You don't get into a situation where, you had a debate and you have a yes and no question in terms of racism. I don't care if you've been asked the question 1,000 times. You only got to say, yes, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist. It's very easy. You don't do those things because it empowers those people in those instances to really say to themselves, like, okay, he's on my side. I'm not going to be in a spot of leadership and say, like, you know what, we're going to die here today because we don't have the security that we need to. I know that I need to make a statement in this spot because of the fact that people are going to rely on my words. And fortunately, God willing, I said the words that needed to be said to really not to fan the flames, but to bring spirits to where it needed to. And then the situation was resolved. I'm speaking to that. The bigger issue of being a person that is influential and being completely aware, because sometimes we say things and we're not aware of what we're saying because of maybe the moment or the time. But he's very strategic about it. I have a problem with that inherently, that he does that. That is what I'm speaking to. And it creates these other avenues for people do the wrong things, which I don't agree with. That is what I'm speaking to.
Right. So going back to your point, right there in that situation, that specific point, and that is like with me, when he came out in that moment. Now, keep in mind, prior to that moment, Trump had been not only accused as a racist multiple times, which is like for people who really, who know his history and know all the different, hip hop artists and various, entertainers and whatnot, whom are melanated that he, gravitated towards and was friends with. He's never been accused that prior to him, becoming president and running for the presidency. But in that period of time, he already been accused of being racist, being accused of being Hitler, all sorts of things. So in that moment, I don't hold him. Will you and I have addressed it different and said something different? Probably, but just like I know that there are multiple ways in addition, in math to get to the sum of 7. 1 plus 6 is 7. 2 plus 5 is 7. 4 plus 3 is 7.
Yeah,
in his way, he came out and he said that, the media was trying to demonize everybody that was associated with that particular event, if you will, that took place. And then he came out in defense of some of the people who were there, saying that absolutely not all these people are these monsters who you're making them out to think, they are and whatnot. There are good people on both sides, and they are. Many of those people, that they wasn't motivated by hatred. They were motivated by the fact that they see their interests, being harmed and hurt, which impacts their families and their children.
They're a part of the alt-right, which is a hate group. And then to even speak to Trump in regards to like this quarter,
I was talking about the march were online.
It was kind of like materialized out of nowhere that he was called a racist. If you recall, during Obama's presidency, he made an entire thing about the birth certificate.
Right.
He made all kinds of statements.
I don't believe Obama. I have questions about birth certificate myself. And I'm not racist.
You don't question Trump's birth certificate, right?
No, I don't question his birth certificate. But in regards to Obama's birth certificate, I absolutely, how it was introduced and how like you were saying, sometimes is what's not said and what could have been said, during that whole situation. Look, man, I have some questions about it too. I don't believe Obama. First of all, he was being hyped as I voted for him. Let me say that. The first time around, I voted for Obama. So, I'm not coming from hatred, someone who didn't vote for him, someone who didn't support him. I voted for him. And then after I saw his first term, how he governed, and how he behaved, the second time I did not vote for him. And I haven't voted for a presidency, for anyone to be president since. Based on what I observed from him, and then what I've even heard from others, even including Trump. So it's not like I'm taking this crazy position. It's just that I myself had questions about that birth certificate as well, and I felt like I don't know if I would go as far as call Obama a Manchurian candidate, but based on what he ushered in and some of the actions that he did, throughout the world and during the time of his presidency, which included, killing our brother Omar Gaddafi, over there inside Libya and whatnot and everything, among others, the amount of drone killings that he participated in, American citizens that were killed, in these strikes as well without due process. There's lots of questions I have, in regards to, who was controlling him. You know,
And he says
and
that
ultimately,
that's his
So
number one regret.
you
That's
believe
his number one
Obama?
regret. How Gaddafi thing played out. He said that's his
that wasn't
number
my
one
only one.
regret.
Like I said, I mentioned a few
I
on
said
my
that's
end,
his number one. I'm talking about
but yeah, but
Obama's
I'm just saying
regret.
the question Obama's birth certificate in and of itself does not make one racist. That was my own.
I didn't say just that alone. I'm just saying in general. He had a lot of vitriol that really supported a lot of this white supremacy.
We should probably agree to disagree on that point. I put it this way. I
That
tend to
could be
agree.
another show with doing with
Well, yeah,
Obama,
yeah,
but
well,
you
yeah.
know, man,
Well, no,
I'm
we're
real
not talking about
critical.
Obama. Well, still, but I'm just saying that I get that. But I'll say this. We were like way over time, and
Okay.
I don't want to get snatched up. But but I will say this to Brother Youssef. Another example of McCarthyism on the other side is like the extreme cancel culture of the far left. I mean, or the the far left. I mean, the far left is basically as crazy as the far right. You know what I'm
True.
saying? It's just so the McCarthyism. It's a two-way street. So I don't want him to think that it's just a one-way thing. But I'm just saying that this hyperbole. When you're taking this far, when you're basically making a logical, you're trying to present a logical progression that takes large leaps of no logic. You know what I'm saying? So again, when you talk about the kneeling thing, he talked about there's good people on both sides. I'm pretty sure he didn't think there were people on both sides of kneeling. He didn't think there were good people on both sides of protesting what the police do. You know what I'm saying?
In regards to
It's
kneeling, I'm one who would not allow my son to even continue to play football unless not only did he kneel on that damn football field, but also have flyers that were made, you know what I mean, and handed out at the games, you know what I mean, in addition, you know what I mean. So again, I don't agree with Trump, on that particular subject, but moving past emotion, if I were put in the side of a chair and say, hey, look, you had to vote for one of these individuals this time around. Now, granted, where I'm at right now, I'm pretty positive that it won't be Biden nor Trump that actually vote for, you know what I mean, as it stands right now. But, if this seems like it's going to be closer than what it should be, you know what I mean, you might see me casting a vote for Trump, but removing emotions aside, Trump's vision for America, is better than what I see coming from Biden's vision of America and what we saw these last 4 years. You know what I mean? I believe that.
I wish Omar was on this show. One of my favorite quotes for him is that this is a person that's been very critical of pretty much all of the presidents, and has always got if you want him to give you a lot of criticism of Barack or Biden or whatever Republican, whatever, he's gonna have a whole lot of it. But one thing he would say about Trump, reluctantly, he would say that I don't want him to fast track us to fascism. So there's something to be there said about what he's doing.
We saw 4 years of Trump in power. We saw 4 years of Biden, and outside of that COVID situation that kind of derailed a lot of situations that was going good in the country. I like what was happening during Trump's tenure than what I'm seeing over here, or Biden's tenure, for sure.
That he created by not preparing and taking it seriously. He loaded up on weapons instead of loading up on the stuff to deal with that the virus and stuff like that, and then trivialize it. But again, I'm not trying to open up a whole nother discussion. And that we're already an hour and 37 seconds and about 3 seconds for now. So why don't you just wind us out here and give your final closing comments, and we'll just call it a day, brother.
And my closing comments is, again, even though there's many things I don't necessarily share politically with the majority of the students, protesting and standing up for Palestinians and calling for their government and their institutions to not support, Israel in this hour. I got to commend them. I got to applaud them. I believe everyone who is anti-war, it has an anti-war position, for nuclear disarmament of these nations and want overall peace, should be standing with those students. And I will hope the students adopt, some tactics and strategies that would make, their effort more attractive to others to be able to, stand side by side with them on this issue.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, you see what we're doing here? We're talking, communicating, and we're doing it very respectfully, and we're very passionate as well. I wish there was a way, and obviously we have that there's an effort in terms of diplomacy, but I don't know if people have given themselves, and I'm talking specifically with the protests, an opportunity to really hear the other side. And I think that's fundamentally what the problem is. And I already talked about it. I don't know if we'll ever get to a solution, but you need to be able to do this. Talk and understand the differences, because you've had too many things happen on both ends where people are going to feel a way about it, and we're only really haven't really heard completely both sides of this the story, other like bits and pieces of it. So, but I feel like I gained a different perspective here from brother student X here, as well as Mr. Nice Guy. So I just want to appreciate throughout the fact that you guys educated me a lot, in the conversation today, and I felt like I gained a perspective that I didn't have before as well.
And my closing comments is I want to send a shout out to brother Joseph Yusef White. I understand that we don't see completely eye to eye, but you know what I'm saying. I respect your voice, and I respect your information, and I do respect your analysis of it. And
Mm.
again, there's things that we don't agree on. There seems to be a lot of things that we do agree on. So salute to you, brother. And again, it's okay to see things differently. The reality is you see things how you see them. That's a fact. And what we need to do is figure out how some way to interact and deal with each other in a respectful way that, it's okay that someone is other than how we are. So that's it. Thank you for participating in this Right of Center Mutant Politics. And as we're set up right now, this is going to be like once a month. This may grow to more, but usually we're in the spin that back slot when El Poo can't come on the show. But we thank you for watching live and on replay. We understand that most of our views come on replay, and like, subscribe, and we'll holler at you on the flip side. Peace
Awesome.
out.
You guys take care.